Oh, hey everybody. Welcome to Modern Sales Power Hour. We're going to let people get situated here. We have a absolutely fantastic guest today in the form of Danielle Marquis. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Danielle will yell at me if I'm not. But we'll get started here in a hot second. Danielle, have you done any travel recently or any cool trips? And yeah, your video for whatever reason is off right now. Maybe you
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out.
can, no worries. Um, any cool trips recently?
Yes, I just got back from France. Took a 2-week solo road trip across the south of France. Biggest challenge I've done in a very long time.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if I could speak French, it would have been even more amazing. But no, it was beautiful. The weather really held out for October in the south of France. Drank a lot of wine, ate a lot of really good food.
That's amazing. You want to pop out of the in the lower right hand corner. You can hit the little thing that says switch, go backstage, and come back, and we'll see if that fixes the video thing.
Not liking this.
Grumpy. Cool. So let me see here. Now my video is off.
Well, there we go.
Oh,
I was like, it wants to go. I can see it.
Thank goodness. I was missing that sweater. Ugh. It's amazing. Actually, I think you're winning the top game today. I'm second behind you because I've got the my Floral Friday shirt that I'm rocking. One of our SDRs was a huge advocate for Floral Friday, and now it's kind of like permeated the rest of the organization. So
I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Man, a solo trip across France, that's like hardcore. So how long is the drive from Nice to Bordeaux?
It's a little over 8 hours. So I broke it up by 2 to 3 hour stints. So I stopped in a couple towns on the way, and then on the way back, I broke it into 2 4-hour drives through the Pyrenees, which was pretty spectacular.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. And what was your favorite meal that you had there?
Oh, that is the classic question I keep getting. I did a lot of the Michelin style tastings, so it was more about like what was my favorite experience of those. And there was this one place in Nîmes I went to that was like a converted apartment into an upscale eclectic restaurant. So I think that was probably my favorite experience.
Amazing. My request. I would imagine, given how process oriented and organized you are, you may have these in a Google Doc somewhere, and maybe you could share those, because my wife loves France, and so post pandemic, it's one of the first places that we want to go. We want to take our 4-year-old. And although I would imagine that probably like a Michelin starred restaurant wouldn't be super stoked on a little like 5-year-old like running around, but who knows, right?
I don't know. Yeah, it's more if the 5-year-old's adventurous eating.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Wonderful.
Caviar.
Yeah, no kidding, right? All right, well, we can get this party started here now that everybody's here and kind of dialed in. So hey everybody, welcome to Power Hour. What we can do is just kind of familiarize everybody with Goldcast. This is the event platform that you guys are on right now. One of the things that's really great about Goldcast is how easy it is for people to engage with each other, because the whole idea of Power Hour is to be super, super engaging and conversational, and not just like me and Danielle, but also you all with us, because we want to answer your questions. So on the side panel there's a Q&A tab. You can submit questions there, because you have 2 really fantastic experts. So you have 1 really fantastic expert, and then you have me to kind of help out and and kind of be the wingman here for Danielle. So if, for folks who are not familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales. If you're not a member of Modern Sales Pros, you'll be invited to join afterwards. But MSP is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related and supporting disciplines. And so the community's MSP's mission is literally to create an environment for the 25,000 and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to answer on their own, right? And help them see around corners that they may not know about. And Power Hour is literally an example of how we do that, right? By helping people answer questions that other people may have answered previously. And so the way that we do this is through a variety of different types of events. We do virtual experiences like this. We have a robust online forum, Google group for kind of asking questions and getting other sales nerds to answer those questions. And then, of course, we do in-person experiences as well. Haven't been doing that for a hot second, but we're going to be bringing them back here in short order. And so just before we get started, a couple of reminders here. The whole idea behind Power Hour is that we're here to learn. We want you to ask your questions. We want you to chat, or alternatively, you can just listen in if you want to. So without any kind of further ado here, I'd like to introduce our illustrious guest today. Danielle is the VP of Revenue Operations at Zappi. So maybe, Danielle, you can give us a little bit of an overview of yourself, Zappi's sales motion, and a couple of the places where you've brought order to chaos, which is what I like to describe as sales operations job.
Very well said.
Maybe you could or attempt. Maybe you could give folks a little bit of an overview of that.
For sure. So Danielle Marquis, I'm out of Boston. I'm sitting in the Seaport in our office, which is pretty cool.
Love it.
There's actually, for a Friday, a bunch of people in here. And yeah, I've been in the RevOps space for 12 years now. So started out with sales ops, figured out what marketing ops was, got really into sales enablement, and just super hungry and kept building on the space, the knowledge. Where else could you push the limit around it? And that's what excites me about RevOps is it is a constantly evolving space. So I've always worked in SaaS, but a variety of different industries. So I've been in web application performance management, to auction house SaaS platforms, to Huddle, which was sports, getting into sports analytics. So yeah, and now I'm at Zappi, which is probably, I would say, the sexiest product I've worked with.
Nice.
It's market research platform, but really we are helping creators bring their ideas to life. So we work with major enterprises to everything from a product concept to packaging to shelf space to their advertising, and how that's really resonating in the target markets and helping them be better for their customers, which is really cool. And so at Zappi, it's kind of been a fun evolution here since I started. I'm almost 3 years here. And when I started, we had a single sales team and a brand new customer success motion. And they were full cycle, new business and account management, which we quickly learned is not necessarily the most scalable approach to landing and strategically expanding a lot of these bigger companies. So we split into, we have a new business acquisition team. We have our strategic account management team. And then we actually, our long tail is a much more tactical book of business that are running a couple different projects a year versus a more end-to-end platform play. So, and then customer success as well has been growing with all that.
So just to kind of give folks a sense of some of the different sales motions that you've worked on, I knew Huddle, but like auction house software, that's hysterical. Who's the buyer for Zappi? What's like the general ASP? The rough ASP there, and then we can kind of talk about like Huddle as well. Just because I think what's really powerful here is that you've got you've worked on bringing order to chaos across a variety of sales motions, and so for folks to kind of understand where you're coming from there, they can tune their questions accordingly.
Yeah. So Zappi's, we really had one persona when I started 3 years ago, and again, we've just expanded our understanding of how we can impact some of these companies. So typically we do really well with consumer insights and the managers that are responsible for getting a brief from marketing and being able to turn around and say, these 3 names are something you should go forward with, or this type of packaging, and being able to help them get to those decisions so that they can elevate themselves with their teams. And now we've really expanded into, again, everything from that consumer insight manager to digital advertisers and marketers, and really just trying to help those types. So yeah, the manager all the way up to the CMO is really where we play. And then, yeah, so the auction house was much different play. It was
I imagine
selling advertising because they had a high end and a lower end. So you think about like a Craigslist almost type of auction versus a Sotheby's. So the Sotheby's, you're selling to their operations teams and getting them on board, and then the lower end of the auction houses, which is like machinery and
used cars.
Like
so I would imagine that like the enterprise one, there's like not that many of them, right? Like I mean I have no idea, but like I would imagine like the TAM up there is probably like pretty small, but like they're doing a lot of like GMV. And then down here, and it's probably like a very highfalutin sales, like, you know, persona that you're interacting, probably like highfalutin, but also like maybe not super technical. And then down here at like the machinery and the like, you know, livestock or whatever, it's probably like similarly non-technical, but like maybe not as like high, like maybe more like a Yelp Yext sales motion.
And yeah, so with Zappi, again, enterprises are really our total addressable market. Really sits nicely with that more enterprise company. So big customers are ours, like Pepsi, McDonald's.
I can imagine.
And so McDonald's is using us for menu innovation. Pepsi is using us for new product ideas, packaging, all that stuff. So
anytime when you have like a big product portfolio, like a lot of products, a lot of brand managers, and like they don't want to like nobody wants a new Coke moment.
No, and that's been one of the coolest challenges for me, because I always take a move that I know I can help fix or build that operations function and help them operate in a more elevated way. But I also always want to be learning from that experience. Like I don't want to just come in and be like, oh, I've done this before. Great. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I like having that challenge of like, crap, I haven't worked with this type of buyer before. Or for us,
subject matter.
Yeah. For us, it's actually like architecture of Salesforce and how do you deal with all these different buying centers, because you can have two companies in the same industry, right? I use this a lot when I'm talking to our developers about trying to map our accounts to our platform accounts. And like you can have two big companies, enterprises. So you have Pepsi and Coke, who might operate their insights completely differently. So
interesting. Oh wow. And the buying set, like the buyers are different. So like selling them is going to be like super different, right?
Yeah. And that's, we've been doing a lot around like, how can we get better qualification up front? So when we're going into those orgs, we're leading with the right type of messaging. So like, okay, are you trying to improve your digital advertising, or are you on that product innovation play?
Like key use cases, like force management talks about this, like value drivers or whatever. Like in our case, usually like what you're looking for is like a story, right? Like use Atrium as an example. Our story is like, there's like different stories. There's like, oh, are you trying to like, do you have a bunch of reps that are ramping and you want to like instrument their leading indicators to make sure that like everyone's coming into band? That's like a story that you could like, you know, run to the finish line with, and then like helping kind of AEs identify a couple of those ahead of time, and then be like, cool, this is going to be like the tip of the spear that we're going to use for this. And then like, later on you can expand a bunch of different other use cases, but like you don't want to boil the ocean up front because it's just going to get like super confusing. It's kind of like the Harry Potter like sorting hat, right? It's like, cool, which way are we? Yeah, for sure. Wonderful. Well, actually, I think I want to talk a little bit about like revenue operations, kind of like team architecture here in a second, because kind of related to what you're talking about. But for before we do that, just for folks that don't know me, I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm the founder of Modern Sales Pros. I'm also one of the founders of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps sales managers, so AE managers, SDR managers, AM CSMs use data and metrics to improve rep and team performance. So we just like think about sales math all day long and like how to democratize it and make it easier, such that make it easier and more digestible for people who aren't as propeller heady as Danielle, and I mean that of course in the best way. But yeah, like you were talking about going to different organizations, and so I think one thing that's actually kind of with kind of the transition between like kind of pure sales operations, where sales ops is more like a service organization, to the sales function, which is like, hey, do the commissions, hey, cut the territories, whatever, to being kind of like more like strategic and say like, hey, this is the sales motion and here's how it impacts marketing, and here's how it impacts SDR, and here's how it impacts AE, and here's how it impacts AM CSM, kind of more of that like bow tie funnel that like Winning by Designs talks about. How does that change your, like, how's your team structured right now? How does that change how the team is structured? And there's like no right answer here, but like how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I feel like organically, as this space has evolved, I have really gotten excited about how technology fits into it. So
Sure.
I am very like your classic people, process, and then technology gets
Sure.
me excited. So my team right now is more on the technology heavy side for supporting our revenue teams. And so dealing with our rev stack, data integrity, how are we connecting and integrating into other teams here? How are we connecting and integrating into our platform so we can get the right data to the reps in the right format? How do we make it actionable? Because I think there's one thing to like kind of the previous world of sales and marketing ops where you reported on a lot of these things, but it wasn't as obvious of what do you do with it. And that's what I've really enjoyed about how I see technology shaping, or areas where I can help teams focus a little bit more. That's really what I've been building around, is like actionable, actual actionable insights, not
like it's not like reporting the news and like there's something about it. It's like when we first started Atrium in 2016. Whoa, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We did actually, before we started building anything, we did about 150 customer interviews across, it was like sales operations, sales leadership, biz ops, CFOs. And this one gentleman whose name escapes me right now was the head of people analytics at Facebook. And we were talking with him about this. And he had this really great phrase that has obviously stuck with me because I'm about to share it, which is that like the key around like analytics is like, what, so what, now what?
Yeah.
Right. And so like you can't like, and like if you're just doing what, where it's like here's a wall of charts, it's like, okay, that's not helpful. So what is important, where it's like, okay, this person's win rate is low, and that's a problem, because if we continue to feed them ops, it's their bookings are not going to remediate. In fact, we're just pissing away opportunities that we hand to them as compared to, so got it. So what of course is like, cool, how do we remediate problem, or the fact that or whatever, right? And I mean, we think about this a lot as relates to like software and how to like automate that, but it's kind of hard to do, and like we're not there yet. Like we're kind of like 10% of the way to like automating that. Usually what that requires is like a helpful revenue operations function, either that or a bunch of like really crazy propeller head sales managers, which is like fewer and farther between. But like, yeah, I guess that's an interesting question. Like, so do you have like a business partner architecture there, where you have like RevOps managers who are then like assigned to a couple managers, or I can't even remember how big your team is.
It's very small right now. We are going to be hiring more this coming year. But something I've really loved about Zappi is understanding what is our strategy and vision and then building on that. Whereas I've been at other places where, you know, we got to get it to a revenue number. Let's just build teams versus let's understand what we're trying to achieve. What does our current foundation look like? Where do we need to fix the cracks? Now we can build the house on it, right? And I'm sorry, I have a dog that is.
Well, I want your dog to come participate. Who is this person?
This is Teddy.
Nice.
Everyone at Zappi knows him very well. He was in all of our onboarding videos until a little while ago, but
amazing.
Most met Teddy before they met me.
we had so one of our go-to-market operations associates has a corgi Fluffy. I learned this the other day about there are corgis. You can have a long hair corgi that has it's a recessive gene in corgis. I got coached up on this, and so they look like, it looks like a corgi, but it has like hair like a sheltie, right? And this dog has 20,000 Instagram followers. His name is Fry. I know, it's crazy. So I'm a big fan of office dogs.
Vote faster with him. He has an Instagram, Teddy Graham Boss, if anyone wants to. But it's not maintained, so.
But yeah, you were talking about the strategy and how that kind of aligns with team composition.
Yeah, so that's since I've started here, we've been really trying to figure out like what is that SaaS play for us and what direction do we want to scale? So we've gotten some really solid pillars down, and all the teams are really rallying around that. We've had some great strategy sessions, growth sessions. Next week, we're going to get a bunch of the sales teams together to talk through that. And then, so right now my team is myself. I have a Salesforce admin. I have a data analyst specialist. He jokes because he's seen 3 different titles for himself. Little identity crisis, but he's building into that more classic, like, how can we get proactive trending and get to some of those insights? So he's been doing a lot with one of my favorite buzzy topics right now, which is buying signals and understanding how do those play into our sales strategy? How do they play into our marketing strategy? So how can we, implement buying signals? So some of those areas I was talking about, asking qualifying questions, we're also trying to get ahead of those. So we know there's a bunch of buying signals around digital advertising.
You know, like, hey, I know you're interested in this use case. Oh, do you?
Yeah. So
or I have a theory that you might be interested in this use case. Am I thinking about that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So
can't creep them out too hard.
And it's just a nicer way to help build focus so our acquisition team's a mix of inbound and outbound. They're probably at the moment, just because, again, we didn't really ramp up demand gen until we had that solid story down. So like they're probably a third inbound, 2/3 outbound at the moment, but we're trying to shift that around a bit. And, rather than just saying, okay, here's your ICP based on vertical, region, annual revenue, your typical firmographics. Also, here are spikes in buying signals here. So you're better off building your outbound campaign around this company versus that company.
How are you guys operationalizing that right now? Because I know that they're like Zoom Info has intent stuff. There's Bombora, which I think is still independent, if I recall correctly. I think 6 Sense does some stuff around like operationalizing intent. Like, I guess if you hang out long enough in lead scoring, eventually you figure out a use case like operationalizing intent. And I think even like G2 has a bunch of this stuff as well.
G2 does.
Yeah, so
now came out with their own. They're calling it Sales Insights.
Are they repurposing like Bombora data or whatever?
No,
or I guess maybe
so
it's based on like what they do on the feed.
It's based on movements in departments and titles. So you would plug in your persona, your buying personas, and your ICP, and it would say, hey, this QSR, quick service restaurant, love acronyms. This QSR has had a 2x growth in their marketing department. There's probably some good budget there you could go after.
Right. So it's a human centric buying signal. Yeah, this is funny. So when I like using like the dynamism of of data is, yeah, that's like the double black diamond right now, because so yeah, I wrote a
was
book
so
on,
skeptical of it, but
yeah, do you like it?
I got hit up by a BDR that I took the call because he had written to me as well, and I was curious if he was using Sales Insights, because he was like, hey, I noticed the Zappi sales team has grown by X amount. You know, have you found a need for optimizing your commissions process? You're probably still in streets. I was like,
right.
good for you.
Yeah, right. So that's like persona. So the interesting. So in that case, it's like, so I talk about this a little bit in the prospecting chapter of the book on startup sales I wrote, Founding Sales, where there's like human-based information. So like the size of a sales organization, the size of a marketing organization. And so I think the interesting, so this is human-based signal where there's like growth in it. As like when I think about traditional intent, what I think traditional, it's only been around for like 2 years or whatever, but like when I think about intent, it's more like content centric. Like, oh, you're like goofing around looking at forecasting content, or in the case of G2, it's content centric. Like this person's bopping around on sending software, like they're on the Sendoso page on G2 Crowd, and then they're on the Reach Desk page, and so on and so forth. But what LinkedIn adds to that is like a human centric too. So how are you guys operationalizing? Like, what are you guys using, and are you operationalizing that yet?
Yeah, so we use Zoom Info, and
okay. A good Boston company like Zappi.
And yeah, we bought in. We just renewed. We'll go into our 3rd year this year with them. It's been an interesting path. Like it wasn't easy to understand fully how to integrate what they could offer with what we were doing. And the first year was kind of some of that. Like we worked really closely with them. And then they came out with their own intent. They were using Bombara before. Their intent formula is around search based. So IP addresses searching key terms, and almost like Google AdWords. So like searching key terms. So it's based on volume and like breadth at that IP. So if multiple people at that IP are also searching for those keywords, you have a stronger signal string.
Got it. Well, and then so cool. So then how is it going in? Like, how's it going into the Salesforce and getting to the BDRs or marketing or like whatever?
So we use their scheduled. We have their instant and scheduled enrich on, and so they came out with a really cool feature. I want to say end of summer maybe, where their scheduled enrich would also send those intent topics in. So now we're able to actually build out trending and correlation. So we actually had we've done the backwards correlation. So over the last 6 months, we took all our closed won deals and companies and saw how many of those had strong intent signals. We had a 60% correlation with the back correlation. So now we're working on some experiments between our customer marketing, who runs our ABM strategy, and so Connor on my team, the data specialist, is working continually to make sure we're looking at the right accounts, that we've set it up so what we're enriching is actually within our ICP and all that, and then he's feeding that insight to our marketing teams and forwards it off to our sales managers. We're starting with marketing as they experiment, and then we'll build that into more of the sales strategy. But I don't know about you.
Where does SDR live in there?
So at Zappi, we don't have an SDR team.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you guys operationalize those intent signals? Does like marketing start like doing like targeted ads using something like a Terminus or something like that, or do we just like go outbound or like assign an activity to an AE and be like, cool, go send the sequence to them?
So we're starting with vertical and pillar based. So we call our delivery is split between like innovation and advertising, say, right? So we look at, okay, these are having a lot of innovation signals. These are having advertising signals, and we're just at the beginning of operationalizing this. So
yeah, totally.
I don't know fully how well it comes together.
It sounds like work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Especially without a BDR team. I mean, because like what I would do there is like you get a signal and you like flip it to the SDR and be like, cool, go tackle this person to the ground.
Yeah,
right?
and it's an interesting thing. So Zappi has tried BDRs in a couple different, like your classic BDR. We've tried having someone more on marketing that is watching our drift bot and trying to, do more of that live conversation. We've tried actually that tactical team doing that a little bit, but given our market is not really receptive to the like dial and like or email spray, like they're very market research. The folks we need to get buy-in from and help with thought leadership around that are like, that's a really evolved, I feel like, thought process of a industry. You have people that like, if you don't know their lingo or how to really
GTFO sales bro, get out of here.
Yeah, you're not getting in. So that's where like having a BDR, we've found that like our sales reps that come from a market research background are the most successful. We've tried sales teams that were like killer sales reps at other software where you are doing much more of that like outbound activity function. That just it didn't resonate. We didn't get the engagement.
Yep, totally. Got it. So just to kind of close off on the intent and the buying signal stuff, it sounds like what you guys did was you took all your close one, like trailing 6-month close one ops, took the accounts associated with those ops, and then said like, hey, over the last 6 months, what signals would have been generated, if that's even a sentence, for those accounts in a pre-closed state. Oh, look, it turns out that this was correlated. Great. From a go forward standpoint, let's look at those signals, and then we're still figuring out how we're going to potentially operationalize that.
Exactly.
Is that right? Okay.
It's completely correct. And the other cool thing I geek out about with this, and actually I love that Connor keeps me honest about this, because I'm like jumping ahead. I'm one of those like, I'm seeing the vision of how many other areas this could impact, and cross sells, upsells, right? Like seeing a whole bunch of the alerts that were around the innovation pillar, and we sold them an innovation product, and now I'm seeing advertising alerts. I'm like, sweet, this is a cross sell. Let's get that in front of the account manager and make sure they're, they're covering all their bases with these customers. So it really has a lot of cool areas to experiment around, but it's still, I'd say it's still a little new. It's like AI, right? It's still buzzy to me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I think the way that I like to recommend those things is like start with an initial use case, prove utility there. I mean, it kind of goes to the thing we were talking about earlier about like plays and just like, because the problem is if you show up to an organization and you're like, hey, we can do all the things, and then like they're like, okay, well, like let's involve all the stakeholders, and then of course now you got a situation where it's like everyone can say no, everyone has to say yes, anyone can say no, and like congratulations, your deal cycles just went like astronomic and your win rates went to shit, and versus kind of like figuring out like what's the thin edge of the wedge here, what can we get in on, get across the finish line for that, packaged appropriately so we can get that transaction dialed, whether it's like, a 5K transaction or a 10K or a 15K or 25K. And like, this is where I think a good feedback loop between sales and sales operations going back upstream to product marketing. I mean, in smaller organizations, obviously, like we're talking about like different slices of the brain of the same human being. But in order to say like, hey, like we're really going to help our deal cycles and our win rates if we can somehow like narrow slice this such that the transaction size is much smaller to begin with. But if we're going to do that, now we're essentially like writing a check for future us to be like, cool, you can do that initial transaction, but guess what? Like your customer acquisition to like lifetime value cost or like ratio is going to be really bad unless you figure out that upsell. So like, cool, I'm glad that we enlarged our win rate and we compressed our deal cycle because I'd rather have the customer than not. But guess what? Now we gotta keep it rolling.
We gotta build that stickiness, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We call it revenue stickiness. Like that's our pulse right now. It's our heartbeat. And that's like a large KPI for our customer success team. Yeah.
Right. But this just goes back to the revenue operations thing and kind of like continuity across things, and the bow tie is because like you can't just like have a single transaction and be like, cool, like here's your 100K transaction. They're locked in for 3 years. Go see if you can like figure it out or whatever. Because like what we're doing is in modern SaaS, and like Atrium's a great example of this. Another really great Boston company is Datadog. They figured this out super well as well as like if we can compress the transaction, what we can do is we can get into these organizations that historically we'd never be able to get into because they'd never adopt something like, server analytics or whatever in the case of Datadog, or in the case of Atrium, we're able to slide into organizations that might have, like, if it was a top-down sale, like, yeah, we have this huge Looker implementation that we spent like, $100,000 like feeding and watering. And it's like, yeah, but all your sales managers hate it. Nobody uses it. Nobody pays attention to it. The finance team uses it. And because like in our case, we're able to like light up their data very quickly and then slide in with like a $5,000 transaction or $10,000 transaction. Now you're able to unlock a use case and grow a TAM, right, as well. We're like, now you're using these, like you're accessing it. And I imagine, but it creates this kind of like pressure on the team to like, cool, get in, success them, embed them, and then keep going. So and like, if you don't have that muscle, like you're hosed because they're just going to churn.
We're an Atrium customer, and I appreciate the path of buy-in and growth and making sure we have the right KPIs and the right people involved, and they understand the why and what they're supposed to be getting out of it. So we've had that slow rollout of like, first, let's just start sending some dashboards, right? Get them excited about it, get them asking questions, help them start to feel like they own that piece of it, and then bring them into the tool, let them start to peel back the layers a little bit. And actually, I really like the approach to selling. It's something that I think a lot of go-to-market teams could learn some stuff from, is just like, it was a new take on free trials, which I like want to experiment almost ourselves here on.
No, I think if you can, like if you, so can you break your product into something that can be done like that? But sometimes like involving engineering or product is like, it's kind of a long involved thing. So like, can you just kind of like do it with packaging, right? Where you're like, you just like because like literally that's just like changing a slide. You're like, oh yeah. You just price on this. Oh, well, do we limit your actual access? Yeah, we do that at the back end, sure, right? And I think that we actually have a number of customers that do usage-based stuff. So like, I think there's a couple of things here. Like open source software historically, and then also developer tools has historically done a very good job of like easy in, self-adoption, get to success, and then kind of grow accordingly. And I think the organizations that can do that with business tools will have success. You see this both with like things where you can like micro chunk the transaction value or the unit of value. In Atrium's case, like we price on a per manager basis, right? So like per manager or per sales operations person, so you can like put your foot in the water, and then like more people are like, oh, this is cool, I want that. And like pretty soon you've got like 5 managers or whatever. Same with like Datadog. Start with just like, oh yeah, we'll just like start with our test servers or whatever. Like, oh, this is pretty sick, let's put production on here. I imagine in you guys' case, it's like, hey, let's just do like one market research study, whatever. And like they come out of it, and then like pretty soon now, like lots of people are eating it up. And I think that if organizations can figure that out, there's a lot of value there.
I mean, especially with us, we can, advertisements are out there, right? Like we can run some of those through some of these tools. We have a free ad tester.
You can do it for them.
And like, and do side by side. So there's a lot you can do to push the value before you even get to validation, right? Like let them see
show up with awesome.
It's almost hard to be like, why wouldn't I talk to you? That's a
really good point. Yeah, that literally the advertising is out there. It's like, hey, saw this ad creative on the bus, the bus enclosure or whatever. We put it in front of this panel. Would you like to see how it splits by demographic and what have you? And of course, like that brand manager is like, yes, obviously, I want to see that immediately. Do you guys do any of that sort of like outbounding with like pre-done analysis?
We're getting into that a lot better. But we also have like, there's a play around competitor, right? So like if you're going after a telecom, being able to say to one competitor, hey, here's your biggest competitor on our platform. Here's the interesting areas they're getting feedback on, and their ads are performing X% better than yours. You know, make it that kind of no-brainer. That was actually a similar play to huddles, right? Like these teams that you're going into, you know, championships against, you know, you're consistently third in your division, and the top 2 in your division are on huddle. You're not.
Interesting.
So yeah,
that's right. Because like
it's a fear tactic, but you have to add the value back in it, right?
It's essentially it's a provocative consulting.
I like that better than fear.
No, but like this is, I mean, it is. Don't get me wrong. Like this is how like
McKinsey,
yeah, this is how like McKinsey and like Accenture used to sell. Like if you think what's kind of fascinating about SaaS companies, like we sit in the middle of like all these different customers. The same is true of like consulting organizations. Oftentimes one of the jokes I like to make is that like SaaS is like software as a service, but you could also think about it as like service delivered via software. So like use Atrium as an example, right? Like Atrium, we call it data-driven sales management software, but the way to kind of think about it is like data. It's a sales analytics harness that has a bunch of automation on it. That it's kind of like if you had a handful of 24-year-old analysts, right? So it's kind of like a service. So you guys are the same, and then so there's probably a lot of things we could learn from those historical service providers around things like benchmarking or like best practices or what have you. Like we do
with benchmarking.
Yeah,
I would
imagine.
Validation, yeah. So once we get to that part of the customer journey, we call them norms, but it's benchmarking so that you can see based on what you might have tested before how our methodologies compare, but also ideally then that's your foundation where you're getting smarter with your testing if you stay with us on that platform because you're having that trending to go back and look at.
Yep. For sure. Yeah, we have a similar, we do a similar thing from a sales motion standpoint where like yes, because we have so many customers, we can do like benchmarking stuff around like, yeah, this is generally like, the level of activities that SDRs are engaged in, or like, this is how many customer facing meetings AEs are having on a monthly or weekly basis, or, for your market, a win rate looks like a good win rate looks like this. And so like we're able to generate content with that. But like the big thing with us is like, because we're able to like light up data very quickly, because it takes about 90 seconds to turn on an Atrium account, very quickly we can be like, hey, like you had questions around your new SDR, your new outbound SDR motion, and how it's how it's working or how it's not. Let's just go ahead and turn that on. It takes about 90 seconds. We can reconvene in 2 days. It'll be really great. And like that's just ripped off from Datadog, right? Like totally. So question for you on Natalie had an interesting question earlier when she was I think you mentioned that you had split the team into distinct land and expand functions. So, what was the thing that kind of motivated that, and then how has it been working since the change?
Yeah, so it was a bit organic in just natural starting a sales team. You're going to start smaller. You're going to understand who your customers are. How did they operate? What makes them tick? And how ultimately can you continue to provide value for them? And what we realized is one person doesn't have the it started with bandwidth, really. You don't have the bandwidth to continue your win rate of new logos while expanding your footprint with existing logos. So that was kind of the first. And then you get into just the type of selling personality. I mean, that's the stuff I love about sales enablement too.
Sure.
It's not just training and it's not just playbooks, but there's a whole component around coaching and understanding not just who your buyer persona is, but who's your sales persona. Like, what are those personality traits that are going to make a good hunter or good, farmer, and understanding that those are very unique. Like, we've talked a little bit about who should own cross sells or upsells, customer success or account managers. And I'm very on the side of that stays on a sales spectrum, because you don't want a personality in customer success that wants to talk about money. You want someone that can identify those and tee it up for their account manager for sure. But you want to keep that separation of church and state. And also the strong personalities you're going to get around customer success, other things are driving their excitement, right? Like
Yeah, their personal
are a little
energy.
bit different than what gets up a sales rep in the morning, right? It's kind of like
sales rep wants to win. Customer success person oftentimes just like wants to be loved, wants to be valued for like you're so smart, you're so helpful. I really appreciate this. You're fantastic. Can I get your address so I can send you a Christmas card?
Yeah, it's. I think about. I don't know if you've ever heard of like the PI personality tests that they'll give a lot of. So your manager fills out those personality traits, and then the new hires do, and you see how much of a fit they might be for your team. I've been coming up in my career. I took those at my first 2 or 3 companies, and every single one of my operations managers pulled me aside and was like, your PI is like totally our sales profile, right? And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what keeps me up. Like, what keeps me up at night is how shitty our sales flow is, right? How clunky our Salesforce is. That's what keeps me up all night. So that's my money in the bank, is making my customers, which are internal folks, successful. And yeah, technology is a whole nother hot take. We can go in. There's 2 hot takes I have in my head right now around RevOps, and the landscape of the Rev stack, which is massive these days, and how so many of the big players are starting to consolidate. I'm actually like curious on your take on that, because I'm loving how Gong's evolving, right? Like Gong started as conversational AI, and now they've gotten into, okay, we have all this.
We got like deals
around the like key
deal
topic.
Health.
Let's drive. So let's get to deal health, and then okay, now
let's do forecasting.
Not just deal health, but also this new assist is like getting into the sales engagement play, right? Okay, you mentioned you were going to follow up. Here's an email teed up that you can go follow up on that call. Here are the key takeaways from the call, already teed up for you. It's like,
yeah, it is. My vanity light went off here. My Diva light. Yeah, totally. I think actually Craig's last name, Rosenberg, from Topo. So Topo got bought by, did he get bought by Forrester or by Gartner? I forget. Anyway, he had a really good blog post on kind of like sales madness aggregation or whatever. It had like this really like provocative title, shocking, right? And I think it's been fascinating to kind of see how that's like playing out. Like obviously SalesLoft has been acquiring a bunch of different companies. Outreach has as well. Outreach. Yeah, and then ZoomInfo as well.
And they're like, so would you like Ringlead? Would you like Chorus? I was like,
yeah,
I have LinkedIn and I have Gong.
Yeah, and I think what's happening there is like those big aggregators. I think there's places. I mean, this is like more of a product strategy and investment strategy conversation, which is cool. But but for revenue operations, people who are like making bets from a budget standpoint and also an investment architecture standpoint makes a lot of sense. I think what's happening there is like you've got things that are kind of like table stakes, and they're going to start being embedded. Like it turns out that it's just like recording a call and then like spitting out a transcription. That's like not complicated, right? Like Google offers APIs in order to do that, and so like that's going to become kind of table stakes. And so I think this is like a traditional technology like growth and then deployment cycle. You see that, and so I think what that does is that frees up opportunities for like creative. Like one of the things I like to refer to as sales operations people as like the product manager of the sales organization. And so what it does is it frees up some time for those people to kind of go on to the next most complicated thing, which is like intent, as an example, right? Or like data-driven sales management. Like, cool, we don't have to worry about like conversational intelligence or whatever, because like we have like 3 different tools that like it's already baked in, it's in the water, right? Now we can focus on helping the managers be more data-driven. We can spend our calories on that as opposed to this thing over here. So I think that, and the customers went out too, because there's a lot of overlap as well and kind of like slop in the system, and you don't want to have like too much overlap. We're like, oh, I have this and I have this and I have this, and they like the use cases overlap, and like where can I squeeze things together. But I think it'll be helpful for folks. And then also the nice thing is it allows more space for more innovation for like new things.
Yeah. That's what I'm excited about. Because I do think like being in this game for so long, some of these things are just like, okay, I know I need this here, right? Like I know you need a CRM. Depending on,
for instance,
what's You need a database to hold your customer. If you're still in spreadsheets, it's not going to scale very well.
Right.
But so you need a foundation for a lot of the data and process orientation, and then I'm a huge fan of sales engagement software. So I implemented Outreach at Huddle. We have Groove here, which I was not in the buying team for that because it was before I got here, but I've learned a lot about how their technology works, and just their team in general is just like really awesome partners to work with. And the cool thing I like about Groove is talking about some of these technologies, right? You had all these point solutions where you're now managing a database here, and a database here. And you're like, okay, I got to make sure when I add a field here, I remember that I need to add it in these two. And then I need to map all the fields. And then I need to decide, oh, should this one replace that one or no? Okay, well, what are those rules? Groove doesn't let you set through their cadences or flows, they call them, to not confuse outreach cadences and Groove flows.
Outreach sequences and Salesloft cadences.
Oh,
everyone's got their term, right?
I like to call them communication blueprints. That's my enablement term.
That's that's the superset of them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And but with that, Groove won't allow you to put someone in a flow unless they're in Salesforce. So it's not maintaining people records in your marketing automation, your Salesforce, your sales engagement, Drift, which has their own world of stuff, right? So that's what I'm excited about with some of the consolidation or how different point solutions are integrating. A big probably buzz term for anyone at my company listening, because they've heard me say it a million times, is my team is successful if we're optimizing a process for you. We're not successful if you're learning a new technology. So we're successful if you're understanding this is how I strategically outbound. And while you're doing that, guess what? You're going to learn 3 or 4 different tools.
Right. Like you use Zoom info for this and the signal for this, and then here's the Groove thing right here. Right. Exactly.
And ideally, if we've done it correctly as a RevOps function, it feels like I'm reaching out to an outbound prospect. I'll warm because I know they've done X, Y, Z, but so that's what I get excited about, is like, how can we bring some of that disjointed tech stack into an integrated process? Which actually brings me to my next hot take on evolution of RevOps. Like, the more and more I've been, I have a book actually, I can link it into the chat, that I need to read more fully. So I don't want to totally endorse it.
Which book is this? It's a RevOps book?
It is Move, the 4-question go-to-market framework. So our president, Ryan Berry, texted me one Saturday and was like, you need to read this book. I just made the whole leadership team read it. It's fascinating. So that's my next book on my business reading list, which I don't know about anyone else, but it is hard to motivate to read business books after.
Oh, this is Sangram. This is one of the founders of Terminus.
Yep. So
awesome.
But it's also like that go-to-market function, right? Like go-to-market operations. I've heard that on a couple different forums lately. Like, is that the next step of RevOps? So it started with sales ops.
That's what we call our team. That's what we call our team here. We call it like GTM, because it's just like, rather than having kind of these like siloed things, we just call it like the GTM team. Now in our case, it helps because like I sit on top of all of it, right? Like marketing and SDR and AE and CSM and so on and so forth. But even just like having people realize like, yeah, dude, we're all just like, to the point earlier about like plays and what have you. Like, cool, you're a running back and you're a guard and you're a fullback right there, but we're all on the same team. In order to run plays, we all work together, as opposed to like, blaming each other or what have you, right? One thing I wanted to note was that it's funny, you had commented on, is this field updated over here and is this field updated over here? But what's kind of neat about our industry is that's where you get new kind of like innovation happening. Like a good example of that is there's a company called Sonar. So Brad Smith.
Sonar.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So like
I'm
Brad
excited
Smith.
for their Pardot integration. I want to see.
Right. Yeah.
Probably our
Or you got,
weakest link is we just haven't had a single admin of Pardot.
so you guys are on Pardot. Yeah. So like, so Brad and Jack were at Terminus together, and they saw that like Brad was the head of RevOps there, and he saw this issue of like, maintaining automations and seeing when things break, and like, essentially like the opaqueness of the kind of like automations and kind of like the click by click development and what have you. And and so now they ship Sonar, and it's like really fantastic, and they're growing like a weed. And so like I think that's what you see is like the stuff that like where it stops being innovative and becomes kind of like, okay, we're now at table stakes, like that's going to get sucked up into the big aggregators, like the gongs and the outreaches and what have you. And then it kind of makes space for the new innovation there. So what were you going to say is your second hot take again?
Yeah,
It's on
so
it's not the book, is it?
No, if you're moving into go-to-market operations space, right? I've been getting more and more involved with our support function, and we have something called fulfillment, which is like, I mean, in our industry, you work with sample providers and a couple other third parties. So they're a team that is literally dedicated to helping sales teams understand if a study is feasible, but also making sure that study makes it through the field and back.
It's delivered. It's like ad ops with like big ad roll or whatever. Like, hey, okay, we sold this, now we got to deliver it, right?
Two teams that are impacting your revenue stickiness, churn rates, but typically operate very siloed. I'd say like support, you typically have your own like support org, and as you scale, and that's something we're just building out what customer support truly is going to look like in the future for us. And that's something I've been pretty steady on wanting to be involved with, because that is a representation of your product, your company. They are ultimately someone who's dealing with your customers at some of the most fragile moments, right? So understanding how they can be aligned with, right? Like if they can see the same records that your customer success or account management might see, they can be more informed when they're having those conversations. Or if we can get better case data in front of CS, you have a more informed CBR. We call them CBRs, customer business reviews, instead of quarterly. QBR. That way you're not like stuck in a corner of every quarter. But
sure. Like let's assess your value. Yeah, for sure. But like, hey, let's get together. Let's assess your value. Let's talk about next use cases. Let's talk about, all those different things. Yeah, and this is all about like orchestration across the journey there, which is I really like what you described there, Danielle, where it's like this is not about a technology, it's about a workflow. It's about a job to be done. Like I need to reach out to a receptive contact and book a meeting. Cool. What are the different things that happen as a result? I need to have a quarterly business review and show utility that has been delivered so far, and then talk about the next two most appropriate use cases. Wonderful. What are the mechanisms by which that would happen? And of course, that's like orchestrating a process, and there's probably technology associated with it, but it's not just like, ooh, let's like go ahead and get this like fancy new widget, right? Which I feel a lot of times people kind of get wrapped up on.
I just did I responded to a LinkedIn post, and I was like, God, number one gets me. You talk to a business owner who's having a problem. They're like, just go look at this new tool for me. And it's like, no.
What are we trying to do here?
By the way, I love evaluating technology. It's one of my favorite parts of my job, but I don't want to go just buy a tool. A tool is never going to solve your foundational problem. So there's a couple of words. If you have heard me speak on any of these types of things before, it's probably overkill, but it's what I really drive any of my vision from. But that's like, make sure you have a healthy foundation before you build. Think about the outcomes and objectives of what you're doing before you start, right? Like it sounds simple to say that, but so many people just jump into a request or jump into a tool or.
It's like the joke about how like Apple writes the press release first before they build a product. It's like, what does this commercial look like? Like paint to me the vision. I want an SDR. I want the SDR to come into the work, sit down, have a list of like very receptive contacts in front of them, be able to like sort them into the relevant sequences, do some customization on that. Okay, got it. I like that. I like that as a vision. Cool. Now let's talk about the mechanisms by which we're going to get them there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Danielle, unfortunately, we're out of time here. So thank you so much for joining us. It was absolutely delightful.
No,
I think we got to talk about a bunch of like really rad things, like operationalization of intent, kind of orchestrating and structure of a new revenue operations team, land and expand stuff, etc. Next week on Power Hour, we're going to have Trish Bertuzzi, who of course is like absolutely fantastic, another Bostonian. She's going to be joining us on the 17th, so go ahead and register for that. And Danielle, have a great weekend. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. You too.